Lockdown. It's the event no one expected, but... Now, we all know about the direct victims of the coronavirus, but how about those who are not so obvious? In March 2020 to March 2021, referrals to adolescent mental health services doubled, and referrals to emergency crisis teams for under 18s increased by 62%. It appears that the pandemic has created a new epidemic of mental health crisis, whether it's in adults or teenagers, and it's clear that there's been systematic failures in helping these people, and the government just doesn't seem to care as much as they should. So this film is aimed at just raising awareness and showing those systematic failures through people's real stories.
So I'm Ben.
Hi, I'm Lex.
I have diagnosed impulsive ADHD and borderline personality disorder. I've been in and out of CAMHS since I was in year 3. When I got diagnosed with ADHD, that was year 3. So obviously I could go off on a massive rant about, oh, look how many things have happened in my life. I couldn't pinpoint it. Obviously I grew up without my dad. Then I had another dad, and he left as well. The cycles usually are really, really depressed, like crippling, like I don't want to be here, I genuinely want to kill myself. And that can last like a few hours, and then I can get over that, and then it'll switch into like mania almost, where I just feel like actually what was I talking about? Everything's literally fine. I'm actually in a really happy place. Shifts can change from being like literally it can be like a few minutes. So like, I could cycle through an emotion in a few minutes. So I'll just be chilling, and then all of a sudden I'm properly angry or properly happy or properly upset. Literally like two completely different people with different personalities and everything. Because obviously, like when I'm in a normal state of mind, I see things a lot clearer. It just feels like I'm someone different, and it does impact my relationship because I've never had the time with like a parent to just talk things through. And so like I've just kind of grown up not expressing things, I guess, to people. My brother hung himself. That was awful. Obviously, like the medics came and resuscitated him. But like, it put a lot of guilt. I felt a lot of guilt because I was the one who was like, well, obviously out of the 3 of the older siblings, because I have 5 in total. I was the one who started like cutting and stuff, and I can't help but feel like I'm the one who like gave him the idea, which obviously, isn't.
You're the oldest sibling?
Yeah.
So do you kind of feel like you almost have to take on that parental figure?
Yeah. Because
does your school provide adequate support? You've been there for a few years. Has it ever had good support for you?
they notice things like blood stains on my trousers or etc. Then their protocol just send me home for like no set time. It's not like if you feel okay to be in school, which is what helps me, just being in school, pretending it's not happened, kind of thing. Just forget out, like that's what would help me. But they just know you've got to go home in case you do it on our grounds. That's what it feels like. I had a week. I had like a period back in year 11 where I was having really bad panic attacks, and nothing would bring them on. I'd just be chill, bang, panic attack, which now in retrospect it's like, oh, borderline, yeah, that makes sense. I've switched into like anxiety mode or something. But they sent me home for a week from one, and their reasoning was it's distracting to other students. That made me feel stupid.
Yeah. So you have ADHD, so what measures do the school provide for the exam kind of period? Do you just get extra time? Do you get a different room?
I get everything, I think. Not everything, but I get a lot. I get 25% extra time. I get to do it in a separate room. which I never asked for any of these. These are just what we're given, and I get rest breaks. No, my mum has diagnosed depression, my brother has diagnosed depression, and my sister Sophie, she has diagnosed anxiety.
Mentally, if you were struggling, if you were stressed, depressed, anything, is there someone in particular you would be comfortable going to?
Probably not at this school. Last year we went to our English teacher Stella, who sort of like runs the high school, whatever, and we asked her if we could get a school counsellor, and then she was like, "Oh no, we can't afford that. We don't have any rooms, but I'm going to take a counselling course." And we all sort of looked at her and was like, "No offense, Stella, but out of every single one of the teachers at this school, you are the least likely that any of us would ever come to. So we don't really have like a main teacher." And I suppose they all like say that they're there.
Did the school help with that? You know, did the school kind of pick up that your grades have changed? Did they mention it? Did they do anything? Or
they didn't. Well, my parents, before we joined school, my parents had emailed the school being like, Lex's dog, and at this point my parents were, I was doing badly, so my parents were like, maybe we need to get her grief therapy or something. But they'd emailed the school being like, her dog has died and her cousin has killed himself, so could you just go a little bit easy on her? And then the school emailed back being like, yeah, there are these films, because we were doing film studies. Yeah, there's this film we're going to watch. If she wants to leave, she can. You don't do exams.
So you don't do exams?
No.
So do you find that you, stress-wise...
Yeah.
Imagining if you had like one end of year exam like you would with GCSEs or A-levels, do you feel that you're less stressed than you would be if you had that?
Definitely. I already know from even in year 6 or whatever, just thinking about SATs or whatever, I was sitting there and I know, like, for me personally, I was always put in like the top levels all throughout primary school because I was smart enough to be in them or whatever, but then as soon as they put an exam paper in front of me, I'd get like bottom in the year of like the entire exam, which obviously very debilitating on like your self-esteem or whatever. You feel like shit afterwards. But I always got really low marks on those exams. But with this, because it's like a continual, it's just throughout the year they keep on checking up on you.
So it's not like they shove you in an exam hall. It's
no.
So it's kind of like you're doing like lots of coursework. So it's all
essentially
coursework.
It's just all basically.
So last year I was diagnosed with generalised anxiety disorder, depression and PTSD.
Okay, so are you currently working with CAMHS or?
So I was. I have a discharge appointment next week. I found that they've been completely useless.
Oh, yes.
As have my school. One of the reasons I picked the school that I went to was their outstanding pastoral care, but I've found that it's actually been anything but outstanding. They've been quite slow to follow up on my concerns. It took 3 months from me going to see the head of safeguarding for anything to be done about what I'd said. And the pastoral team that works at the school are quite dismissive. They gaslight you, they're rude, and I've just found that in my experience it doesn't really work. Without giving too much away, is that there was a series of suicides in the space of a year, and a job when the job of safeguarding lead was given to the guy who was the head of year of the students who committed suicide in those schools, which personally I find extremely problematic. And when I've had experiences with him, I've found that he's extremely dismissive, rude. He will ignore what you're saying and just kind of float around what you've said, slow to respond. Just
kind of, what help did you actually receive from CAMHS?
So I went for one appointment and I was in there for an hour, and straight away they gave me antidepressants without too much thought. I hadn't had any counselling before that through CAMHS. I just walked in and she was like, okay, so you're going on antidepressants. And when I told them that they didn't work, they had quite a few problems with that. And they were like, oh, but you haven't tried. And I was like, well, in my experience, it just hasn't really worked for me. and they didn't want to give me other options, so I had a constant headache for 2 weeks. I woke up every morning feeling hungover. I was missing lessons, I was late for school. I just felt like a corpse of my former self.
So let's have a look at your PTSD. I think that that's a condition people don't really know much about because it's kind of portrayed in movies in quite a...
Yeah.
I think it's quite incorrect as far as I know.
Before I'd gone to CAMHS, I got my diagnosis. It's something that had been brought up with me through the social workers about 7 years ago. But until I walked into CAMHS when I was 17, I hadn't really thought about it. So in my experience, it's just been like bad dreams, severe anxiety around certain like stimuli, certain situations causing me to be extremely anxious and nervous. But it's not like it's badly portrayed in the media.
Yeah. How did it kind of develop?
So it developed through some experiences that I'd had when I was a child, and then it kind of just, as I got older, they like manifested in kind of weird ways. Like certain situations I just can't put myself in because of what happened.
Yeah. And so you have generalised anxiety and depression. So how do they kind of tie into it?
So I find that the anxiety and the PTSD are more linked than the depression and the PTSD, because as I said earlier, that certain situations will make me extremely anxious and nervous, like shaky, sweaty, visibly upset. So whereas the depression, it kind of comes in waves, but not directly linked to the PTSD, I would say.
Okay. When did you first kind of start to find it challenging?
I find it mostly when it's the hard lessons where they set the most homework.
Okay.
Because on those days it like really makes me feel anxious.
And you mentioned about having like little panic attacks. Could you kind of talk me through what happens when you get those and the kind of, if there's any specific triggers?
Well, it's mostly before the day and when I'm going to school, because I think, oh, have I forgotten something, or oh, have I have not done the homework, and I get really stressed out.
I had them in like lesson. Has that ever been a problem for you?
Probably right at the start, but like it's like calms down a bit.
And in your school, if you did want to get some help there, do you feel comfortable going to any teachers, or is there anything that you know would be available?
I know what would be available, but I don't really go to them because from my friends, they don't really trust them. So.
Hey everyone, my name's Eliza Gardner and I'm 17. I'm from London and I produced this film as part of International Junior Miss. I was diagnosed about 2 years ago with depression, generalised anxiety and atypical anorexia. With my eating disorder, I was always kind of quite disordered. I had a bit of a kind of binging problem, so when my parents would be working, I would come home and I would eat like literally the biggest plate of pasta and like a whole baguette of garlic bread. I mean, I would have about 5 bites and I would feel sick, but I would just keep eating and eating and eating. And I would literally, my stomach would ache, I would feel sick, I would feel bloated, but I would just still keep on eating. Then when we went into that first lockdown, I found myself, so I'd always been very body conscious, even when I was little. I've got quite, I guess, big thighs for my size, because I hold a lot of muscle there. It's just how women in my family are built. And I was literally from like the age of, I don't know, 7, I was insecure about it because none of my friends seemed to have thighs like mine. I kind of fell into fitness side of things, and you know, it was kind of healthy at first, like, because at first it wasn't disordered. I was just trying to make healthier lifestyle choices. I was really proud of myself. I was feeling really good. And then kind of I struggle to remember what point this happened. I kind of started like just over exercising. I would do like multiple at-home workouts, maybe like 40 minutes worth of HIIT workouts, which if you were just like lifting weights or walking on a treadmill, that would be normal. But HIIT workouts, especially the online ones, they are intense. Like I'm talking I would do like multiple of the ones that are like 15 minutes long. So I was doing way more than I should have. And on top of that, I would go out on a run with my mum the same day. I would also go out to the stables and run. Yeah, that was kind of my fall into disordered eating. And at one point, like I think I ate a few Pringles over my calorie limit, and I felt so guilty. I lay down on my floor just doing crunches. Like I think I did like 200 crunches, because apparently that was the amount I needed to do to burn off the calories. So for a while I literally would throw tantrums at a roast. I would almost cry if I was given like a Yorkshire pudding. That's how bad it was. But all the times of my disordered eating, the reason I was atypical is I don't think I ever restricted my calorie intake severely enough for it to really, like, my weight to plummet like you would with normal anorexia. So I just kind of, I think that I carry my weight quite, I don't know, uniquely. So you could see that I wasn't healthy in my chest because it was just so bony, but then kind of my thighs kind of looked normal. So I think from an outside perspective, you know, you couldn't see that I was struggling with atypical anorexia, because that's why it's atypical, because it's not, people seem to have this conceived idea of anorexia that you have to be stick thin and really, really sick all the time and look like you're about to drop dead, but that just wasn't the case with me. I'm also going to have a short talk about CAMHS and my treatment in CAMHS, and also my treatment in school. And so my mum contacted the GP because I had a self-harming problem, and that was in like October of 2020. And even though I had this self-harming problem, I was saying I had suicidal thoughts, everything like that. CAMHS took till December to even have an appointment with me. Literally 2 months. So I had a nurse, I won't say her name, but I mean, I just didn't really like her. I remember on that appointment I'd said to her that sometimes I would like overdose on paracetamol, not necessarily to commit suicide, but just like a kind of self-harm thing. I can't remember exactly what she said, but it's almost like she made me feel guilty. And then after that, I mean, I can't even remember what they bothered doing with me. I think the one thing they did is get my school to give me a counsellor who was not good. So in March I had been assaulted in the December before, and obviously I had the depression and the eating disorder, and I had all of this, and I was just very anxious and overwhelmed all the time. And I think all these things ended up with me, I would kind of have panic attacks either in school or on my way to school, which kind of started in the March. And there was a point where I was just saying how suicidal I was. Like, I was just so suicidal, I was so depressed, I was so anxious, like I would literally break down crying over anything. And I spoke to, obviously my mum and my dad were seeing this firsthand, and they didn't know what to do because CAMHS hadn't done anything. So at that point I finally got a CAMHS psychiatrist who just chucked me on fluoxetine, which is what they seem to do for everyone. And a few weeks after that, I was still, I was still just doing just as badly, if not worse. And my time in hospital was even worse. than it already could have been, because the doctor I had, I felt that she was very kind of demeaning. Her manner wasn't very nice. She took hours and hours and hours and hours just to sort the bare minimum out. It was just terrible. We were in there from around 10 o'clock at night till 5 a.m. in the end, and I didn't want to stay overnight because I kind of bought myself out that state. I didn't want to, and they were going to make me stay on the children's ward, the paediatric ward, and obviously as like a 16-year-old girl, I did not want to be around screaming, crying children all night. Like, can you blame me? Not really. So that put me off as well. And they made us stay around till 5 a.m. to meet this woman from a team that I think it's called Interact. And I guess she was perfectly nice, but we stuck around till like 5 a.m. just for this woman to go, let's make this plan. If you feel like this again, go to your mum, or use a distraction technique, or take a bath. You know, everyone talks about, like with CAMHS, the bath and the tea, and to be honest, it's completely true. And you know, all these people in positions of power didn't do anything to help me, really. I finally got a new CAMHS nurse. Don't know if I can say her name here, but she was just a lifeline for me. She is, I still have her now, but she's absolutely amazing. I adore her. Yeah, I really love her. And she really, you know, every single time I have an issue, she does absolutely everything she can to help me.
They don't fucking do nothing. I know things can feel overwhelming, and they sometimes will be, but the worst thing you can do is stop, because the second you stop, everything else around you, that keeps going, but you've stopped. And when you finally deal with whatever was overwhelming, then you're in a whole new fucking pan of shit, because you've got to deal with everything that kept going without you.
A lot of people talk about how talking sometimes makes everything better, and I found that in my experience sometimes you do just need to don't let it get to a point where it's like eating you inside, but sometimes you do have to just sit with it for a little bit and kind of just digest what's happened. And you don't have to talk about things straight away, but yeah, I think that's quite important, because there is this big culture of you have to talk about it and it will make it better and you have to open up, and that's the solution to everything. But I don't think that's necessarily true. Yeah. Especially in my experience.